It's day 8. I've never made this long before. I'll be dead soon. Horror, romance, sci-fi, action. I won't go through all of them, but like most people in this century, you probably recognize your movie genres. If not, then stop wasting your time outside and watch a movie for once. If so, then my hat off to you. Congrats on becoming yet another mindless sheep in our modern consumer society. That's beside the point. What I'm trying to explain is that these are the typical categories every movie fits into, the nameable ones. Then there's what I might refer to as an offshoot genres, subgenres maybe. I haven't found the perfect word yet, but they're what you might consider the plotlines that keep popping up across main genres, the slight variations. Something a bit more than tropes and a bit less than full-on categories. Think You've Got Mail or Back to the Future. There's dozens of movies and books in romance, comedy, fantasy with the same general plot. Maybe the most recurring offshoot genre though is Groundhog Day. Off the top of my head I can think of Happy Death Day, The Map of Tiny Perfect Things, Live, Die, Repeat. I'll stop there, but I could go on. You probably could too. There's tons of movies with a dozen varied plots about people reliving the same day over and over again, but the one thing they all have in common? The one thing that we, as a society, seem to latch onto with a morbid fascination? When the main character dies, frequently by killing themselves, they reappear in their bed, unscathed. Yeah, that's not how it works for me. Day 10. I'm hearing voices now. I noticed my first injury maybe 2-ish months into the whole Groundhog's Day experience. I'll spare you the boring details. As I've said, you already know this trope. Man goes about his day, man wakes up the next day to the same day as before, man enters denial, man accepts he's in a time loop, etc, etc. I was at what you might call the fun and games part of this whole experience. The part when you've realized all the crazy stuff you get to do now. My days consisted of buying winning lottery tickets, cruising around in expensive sports cars, and copious amounts of bacon and ice cream. This particular day, I decided to give skydiving a try for the first time in my life, because why not? The free fall? 10 out of 10 stars. The landing? 2, if I'm a bit generous. There was a fair bit of scraping and tumbling. A branch cut through my pant leg and sliced up my shin pretty badly. I thought. Whatever. I tipped my instructor a few $100 anyways, knowing my leg would heal itself by the next day anyways. Except, it didn't. I woke up as normal, 7:18 sharp. When I got out of bed though, my leg still ached. The cuts were still there, weeping slightly. The bandages were gone, but I hadn't healed. For a few minutes I thought the time loop was over and I advanced on to the next day after only a few weeks. Except when I checked the news, it was still the same day as always. My timeline had reset. I hadn't. I'd been so familiar with the Groundhog's Day plotline, I hadn't considered that the logistics might work differently in my situation. Once I did realize, there were little clues I hadn't paid attention to before. The biggest signs were my hair and weight. In my defense, I'm well into my 40s, balding, sedentary, and divorced. My appearance is something I stopped paying much attention to years ago. Once I knew to look though, the hair I did was longer than normal. When I finally stepped on the scale, I'd gained nearly 20 pounds. So much for eating like a 20-year-old. There were little things I started noticing too. I would find myself subconsciously biting at my growing nails. Every once in a while I'd get a cold that would last multiple days. The world around me stayed the same, repeating over and over. But I kept changing. Day 11. That's the world record. One more day and I set a new one. My life calmed down after the realization I could get hurt. It's a lot harder to go clubbing when you know you'll have to deal with a hangover. Also, I'm too old. And getting in a high-speed chase with the cops isn't nearly as fun when there's a chance you snap your neck in an accident. Instead, I did safer things. For a time, reading and movies and instruments and such. Eventually, I just started spending more days with my daughter. For context, my reset day was 2 weeks before my only daughter's wedding. At exactly 10:46 each morning, she would call me for help fixing the door in her fiancé's rickety family barn. She and he were renovating it to use for the wedding ceremony, but for obvious reasons, I'd stopped offering to help early into my time loop. What was the point when the progress would reset the next morning? Well, I started again anyways. Sure, it wasn't a fool's task, but she was my only daughter. After the divorce, she'd gone with her mom, and ever since, we'd never had the most comfortable of relationships. I'd call her on her birthdays, and she'd call me when she needed help with a repair job. Apart from that, we were distant. It was sheer luck that my reset day happened to be one when she needed me. Her fiancé, Greg, would show up too at the end of every workday. I'd never spoken with him much. Like I said, my daughter and I were hardly close. Greg and I? No chance. We talk now though, every day. He and she didn't remember it, but I would. It's amazing the sheer variety of conversations you can have in a given situation. In Groundhog's Day, people would repeat themselves over and over. Even if Bill Murray differed from what he said the day before, the other person would continue on the same persistent course, as if determined to stick to the script. My time loop wasn't like that. A sneeze could change the trajectory of a conversation. A question or the emphasis I put on a certain response changed things entirely. Subjects would repeat. Certain ideas or moods would persist, but overall our days would vary. Sometimes she would invite me to stay for dinner. Sometimes I would storm out after a fight. Sometimes we would just laugh the whole afternoon. Slowly the bad days lessened. I knew how to handle sensitive topics and how my daughter felt about her rocky relationship. I was getting to know her for what seemed to be the first time ever. Her fiancé too. Greg was a good guy, caring and kind and all that. I visited them almost every day for, well, not sure exactly. That was before I started tattooing the weeks on my arms. A few years maybe. It was sort of peaceful perfection. I was closer to them than ever. In the end, that's why I stopped going again. I knew them better and better, but they didn't know me. Day after day, I was still the dad my daughter didn't trust. The other parent Greg had never really met. After years of that, of being unable to repair things, it was hard. I started experimenting instead. By this point, most of my hair had gone grey with age. If I couldn't figure out how to end this, I would waste away in this one single day. The tattooing started. At first I would go to a parlor and sit there while they carved a new mark on my arm each week. Eventually, I learned to do it myself. I would get on planes, go as far as I could to see if that would reset things. Never did. I went to therapy. That's how Murray solved his crisis, wasn't it? Self-betterment. I read the Bible, I forgave my ex, I tried fixing myself for months and months. No success. Eventually, I realized how my timeline reset. I'd always assumed it was a time-based thing. At 3:46 AM, everything would reset. But no, it was sleep-based. Life kept going on as long as I stayed awake. For a while, I played around with that, staying up to the next day, carrying over the consequences of the day before and the conversations I'd had. It was my first semblance of continuity. Sometimes I would stay up 3, even 4 days, then collapse exhausted and sleep for a reset or two. I was into my 50s though. Staying up wasn't so easy. I resigned myself to my normal sleep schedule. I experimented, I tested, I tried to escape. Nothing worked.
Day 12. I've beaten the record. The voices have faces now.
I couldn't escape. I tried everything short of jumping off a bridge. I would have done that too, but it's when time would start back up. I was sure of it. Still am. My life would end and my daughter would know nothing besides the fact I'd done it to myself. That wasn't something I could put her through. I was older now. Once I tried revisiting her, and her eyes had bulged outwards as she tried to piece together who this elderly stranger was. No more, I told myself. No more visiting anybody I used to know. Instead, I avoided them in the streets or wore a hat and shades as I went about my life, if you could call it that.
Why?
I would scream in the sky. That's who became the enemy in place of a visible culprit. The sky. The universe.
Let me go!
It didn't. Years passed. At times I would come to terms with my life. Then I would hate it all over again. My state of mind was rarely consistent or stable. There was no way for me to feel ambition, to form connections. I got older and older, almost 70 now. Every morning my daughter would still call. That was the thing that hurt most. Knowing I would never see her again.
Day 13. 13. 13.
And then, I decided I would. How young, I thought about the reporter on the news. I caught a snippet of him while going for my morning coffee, and the memory bubbled up. How old, I thought about the same exact man long, long ago. We'd switched spots, switched ages, and I knew this was it. My life was over one way or another, even if time started back up. There was only one thing left I wanted to do: see my daughter get married. It was the first true goal I'd had in decades. My mind hooked onto it and the barbs sunk deep. I didn't even wait to prepare that very first attempt, simply drank my caffeine and pulled an all-nighter. The first night was fine. I was hyped on the excitement of it all. By morning I was fading, but determined. The second night I paced around my living room, trying desperately to stay awake. The third night was torture, but I'd already gone 3 nights without sleep in my experiments. The fourth night I sat in the bathroom and, just to add salt to the wound, fell asleep on the toilet of all places. It took me a week to recover. I slept 2 days straight, or 1 day, twice in a row I suppose. Then about 12 hours each night after that. At the end of that first week, I made my second attempt. Big mistake, that's what I learned. At this time I made it only 2 nights before collapsing. It took time to recover from things like serious sleep deprivation, especially at my age. I didn't give up. Over and over I would make the attempt. Sometimes I'd wait months between attempts. Sometimes I could only stand to wait a week or 2. It's like working out, I reasoned. You get stronger with time. That wasn't at all how it worked. Instead, I was wasting away. My skin stretched thin around my bones and my gaunt face became more and more unrecognizable. Still, I kept going. I found little tricks for keeping myself awake. If I needed to sit, I would clamp a mousetrap on my finger. When my eyes drooped while standing, I carried a needle around my neck to prick the back of my hand. Slowly, my personal records improved. 6 days. Then 7. Then 9. By the time I got to 10 full days, nearly 5 years had passed. I gave myself 6 weeks to recuperate, and yet at the end of them, I still wasn't fully back to normal. At my age, you didn't recover in the same way as younger folk. If I did make it to my daughter's wedding 14 days away, I wouldn't survive the experience. That much was clear. It was also clear I only had 1 more trial left in me. I waited 2 more weeks before the final attempt. I began. The first 7 days were easy. I'd gotten that far dozens of times by now. The 8th day was less so. I walked for miles that night, up and down my street, gas station to gas station, a Red Bull every hour on the dot. The 9th night I was no less tired, but I pushed through, because I knew what was waiting for me the afternoon of the 10th day. Rain. That's what the weather forecast said, and sure enough, at noon on the dot, it started drizzling. I bawled like a toddler. It had been more than 20 years since I'd felt rain.
I will beat you,
I screamed up at the sky.
You won't take this from me.
11 days. Further than I'd ever come. The hallucinations got worse. Voices, lights in the corner of my vision, things prowling just beyond my peripheral. Even so, I was single-minded. 12 days. I had no appetite, but I forced myself to eat. When I couldn't stomach food, I downed more caffeine. My arms were red and raw. I tore nearly every hair from them.
Daddy?
My daughter said over the phone.
You'll walk me down the aisle, right?
I'm not feeling too well.
I told her.
I don't know. I don't think I'll make it.
In the background, she started crying.
I love you,
I whispered and hung up. Day 13. I will beat you, I thought to the sky, though up and down were no longer concepts I understood. Breathing was difficult. My heart wasn't beating right. The world spun in dizzying circles and dark creatures nipped at me from every side. I wasn't going to make it through the night, that much I was sure of, until I noticed the hefty toaster oven on my counter. I raised it above my bare, shriveled foot. I dropped it. Day 14. Today. The visions went away. The pain too. It doesn't make sense, but then again, 2 weeks with no sleep is uncharted territory. Perhaps that clarity is simply what happened after some arbitrary tipping point. I suspect differently. Ask any hospice nurse. They'll tell you most elderly patients have a day of sentience before they pass on. The body has given up but is kind enough to give one final chance to say goodbye. This was my chance. My daughter wouldn't recognize me. I would attend the ceremony as a stranger, but I would attend. After years of failed attempts, I pulled on my suit. I combed my overgrown beard and pulled a dress shoe onto my non-broken foot. For the first time in decades, I headed to the renovated barn.
Day 15.
I'm not even tired anymore. I've tried to sleep, but that part of my brain has shut down now. There's hours left, maybe less. Good. This can all finally be over. I've lived a lifetime in the span of a day, and I'm ready to be done now. The voices aren't back, but outside my house I can hear the sky laughing, cackling. It thinks it's won, that after years and years it's claimed me.
You're wrong,
I whispered, over and over, a time loop of sorts.
You lost.
Escape was never the point, not for years. I got to do something better. I got to see my little girl walk down the aisle.